Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career. Today we have on the show Adriana Flores-Ragade. She's on a mission to change the narrative for her community one story at a time. Adriana is the founder of LatinxAmerica Media. She's also the host of LatinxAmerica Podcast, a podcast focused on highlighting people who are leveraging, creating, or investing in tech to change the narrative for the Latinx community and increase diversity in tech. She has held leadership positions in the broadcast media industry and education nonprofit sectors, where she's focused on building equity and access programs and partnerships during her tenure at the College Board. At Univision Communications Inc. and Fusion Media Group, she's contributed subject matter expertise, relationship building, and has led investment efforts for selected social impact and corporate social responsibility campaigns. In her spare time, she enjoys being involved in her children's school, extracurricular activities, and traveling the world with her family. Adriana, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much, Raul. It's such a pleasure to join you on your podcast. I recently got your book, and I'm really excited to actually read through it and learn what you've been doing to empower others.
No, I love it. And I really want to dive into your story specifically because, the big question that I want to start off with is why Latinx America Media? Why now? Like, what led up to this now?
So my background, as you mentioned, is in education. I've worked in equity and access, doing equity and access initiative for a very, very long time in the nonprofit sector. And I jumped into the media world, which, working for Univision was like a dream come true. I had
Yeah.
interned for them when I was in college for both Telemundo and Univision, so
Wow.
the two big ones. So actually working for Univision was, especially in the social impact space, where we were working on campaigns, education campaigns, health campaigns, empowerment campaigns. That was very meaningful. But one of the things that I realized when you work for mainstream media is that you're limited, right? Even if your shows or your programs are sponsored, you're limited on the amount of time that you can spend sharing stories and sharing positive stories. So, because you have breaking news, whether it's immigration, health, or something comes up. So, after my tenure with Univision, I decided to launch a podcast. And I said, well, what better way to empower people? And I live in the Silicon Valley where you have amazing talent and innovation. And I was seeing, or actually, I was not seeing my community participate as much in what was happening around here. And we know that we have really smart people like you that are, innovators, that are founders, that are doing great things, but I wasn't hearing their stories. And I think when you don't hear stories and when you don't see people that look like you or maybe have had similar experiences as you, to kind of empower you, it's hard for you to know how to get from A to B. So
Having the awareness,
the awareness. So I decided to leverage digital media at that time, at this time, leverage digital media is very easy to access. And I decided to start creating and producing content. And that was a way for me to contribute and to change the narrative for my community, because if you're seeing these role models, if you're learning about their journeys, the likelihood that you will understand the path or want to be in the role that they are at some point is high. It's probably higher. So for me, it
Oh.
was really important to share those stories, and that's how first of all, the Latinx America podcast came to life, and that was over 2 years ago. And then I recently incorporated into Latinx America Media because I want to scale. I want to scale the impact, and I want it to go beyond just a podcast. I want to focus on stories, more videos, more content creation, so we can increase our impact.
Yeah, I love that. And essentially, it's creating community and touch points and connections. And what are some of the things that, or some of the impacts that you've seen already from developing those stories, from making those connection points? Because I mean, I'm subscribed to your podcast. You've had some pretty amazing people on the show. And I'm really amazed at the type of talent and the type of people that you've spoken with. How have you seen a direct impact just by creating community and sharing those stories?
I think when people are able to connect kind of offline, or they reach out to some of the speakers, and then you have synergies that come to work and they
Mhm.
start working together, I think that's really, really powerful. I had someone that sent me a note saying, "Hey, I transitioned from this type of organization to another, and the stories were like beam light for me. Like
Mhm.
I need to go from point A to point B, and your stories help with the transition." So
Wow.
I think those are some of the powerful stories that we're getting. But for me, it's more about building that social capital. Is
Mhm.
bringing people together that might or might not be in the same space. I know tech space is pretty varied, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be a techie to be in tech. You can be marketing, you can be HR. However, when you start building that social capital, when you start bringing people's stories to light, when you bring people together and you build community, the likelihood that, hey, I now know about you, Raul, so I'm going to introduce you to someone, or I'm going to support your project. And actually, I'll tell you a personal story. I recently became an investor.
Mhm.
Um, Invested a little bit on a fund,
Yeah.
the Rising Tide Fund for with Portfolio. And part of the reason why I did that was because I was interviewing the founder of Chingona Ventures, Samara. And when I was interviewing, she's like, "You need to have skin in the game. You need to, you need to
Mhm.
understand the process of investing and risk taking. And we need to, as a community, understand that this is how you generate wealth, right?" So I was like, "Oh, that makes sense." So I work with Juliana Garizar, who's at Portfolio Funds, and she's also a previous guest on my show. And I said, "Hey, you have this fund," and she actually had put out a call for investors.
Wow.
And I said, "Well, how do I do this? How can you help me kind of walk through the process?" And she immediately got on it, and had the
Wow.
partner of the fund reach out, and I was able to do my first investment. So that's really powerful in a way where I'm hoping that others that are listening to how you become an angel investor, or how you can, invest in funds or launch your own venture, that people are kind of prompted by the call to actions, and they're able to do something kind of like I did.
That's incredible. And it seems not only that the path is possible, but others like me or others in my community are walking down a similar path and I can do it. And that's really powerful. So she pushed you over the edge. That's
She did. I mean, you should listen to her episode. It was so powerful, and she's so inspirational. And Shingona Ventures,
yeah, I know. The
they're
name
doing
got me.
they're doing an amazing job. And I immediately reached out and I said, "Hey, thank you so much. I don't think I would have taken this step had I not kind of listened to your story as I was interviewing you." And then she replied. She was so kind and replied. And but yeah, that's how we start building community, right? And that's how we start taking chances, and that's how we start building wealth, and or supporting one another. Because part of the reason too why I went with Portfolio Ventures was because I knew Juliana, and I know the type of person that she is and how smart she is, but also because she reached out. And
Mhm.
had I not interviewed her, had I not met her through a collaboration that I did with the Angel Capital Association, I probably wouldn't wouldn't have done this. So
That's incredible. And I did hear her episode and she stands also with a lot of confidence. So I think that's another thing too that I've been seeing is that you enable others to have the confidence to take those leaps. So I really like that. So I have a follow-up question to that. There's two questions actually, quite the same, but a little different. I want to first talk about the theme of the questions is trends. So I want to talk about the trends first that we're seeing in the Latinx community and also the trends that you're seeing right now in the tech community. So let's start with the Latinx community. What are some of the trends that you're looking or you're seeing right now in the community?
Some of the trends that I'm seeing in the community is, fortunately, if you've seen graduation rates, they have increased, right? For our community. So
Mhm.
over the years, I'm hoping that the impact that we had through our education campaigns through Univision made a dent in that. So we're seeing people actually go through the pipeline. Not enough, not as many
Mhm.
yet as we need them. I have seen a bit of an increase in diversity
Mhm.
at some of the tech companies, and I'll give you my gauge. And I'm not going to give you stats, but my husband has been with LinkedIn for a very long time, and I pay attention to what happens at the Christmas party or who the people that they're bringing on board. And I have, at least in some companies that are committed to diversity,
Mhm.
to increasing diversity, I've seen an increase. I've also seen a mobilization in the tech community. You have
Mhm.
organizations like Tequeria that are really, really activating the techies in our community. Latinas in Tech too. You have organizations like the Caper Center. So you're seeing a lot more role models, a lot more people come out and join forces to elevate our community. So
Mhm.
in terms of an increase, I think there's now an increase in awareness about the tech space, which
Mhm.
I don't think was there like a couple of years ago. And I think it, in large part, it has to do with the way our community is mobilizing to increase diversity in this space. So in the tech space, the other thing is I also have seen, Lolita Tao is an investor
Mhm.
and she's also a powerhouse. I'm actually interviewing her next week, but you have investors now, you have people that have been founders that are doing a lot more work to bring the rest of the community up. So
Mhm.
you see mobilization too on the investor side. And then thanks to BLM, Black Lives Matter, a lot of people are paying attention to the diversity, to diverse founders, but also, their diversity practices in-house. So
That's
I'm
powerful.
seeing trends in that in the space and that I cover. And then your second question was in regards to?
To tech in general right now, like how are you marrying the synergies between the Latinx community and what's happening in the trends in tech? So what are some of the overlaps and where do we see tech going?
I'm pleased with what I'm seeing. I think we still have ways to go. People are going to be displaced by automation, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we have artificial intelligence. So what I'm seeing is I'm seeing more mobilization at the, college graduate side.
Mhm.
I'm not seeing yet a lot of people paying attention to what's going to happen to essential workers, the essential workers that we're relying on when
Yeah.
automation comes. So I think there needs to be an increase in awareness for our community when it comes to, the jobs of the future or the jobs that will not be available to them in the future. So that, I mean, that's what I'm seeing from where I sit.
Cool. So I want to dive a little bit deeper on that and some of the trends that are happening. So, with some of the shifts that you mentioned that technology or automation is going to replace some essential workers, what are those opportunities that you're seeing? Because when it comes to change, when it comes to shifts in the marketplace, entrepreneurship shines because we can connect problems to solutions. What are some of those gaps or changes that you see happening? And what are some of the things people in the Latinx community or in the tech community or even entrepreneurs and founders can start thinking about today so that when it comes, we're not surprised by it?
So, it's interesting that you ask. I recently interviewed Ricardo Garcia Amaya, and he's the founder of a tech company that focuses on voice technology.
Mhm.
And we talked about how AI is going to, make sure that we're going to be, maximizing the future of work, right, in some way. So he talked about voice technology, and that seemed just really interesting because through voice technology and what they're doing at his company is they're using AI to save a lot of time. So I sit on the board of Squadcast, a startup founded by Latinx founders. And one of the things that we've been really focused on is on high quality customer service.
Mhm.
And it's really hard to do that because they grew from being a small startup to now they're evolving and they're getting more clients. And providing that same level of customer care can be challenging, right? Because it's not them answering all the emails, and they have a lot of great knowledge and information.
Mhm.
So a voice technology could really save people a lot of time because it allows you to serve your customers in a different way. So it's beyond just like getting an automated response. It's more of like, okay, so you have this, so you have the first automated response and then a follow-up response. So they're evolving in such a way where AI voice to have a conversation over the phone with an AI bot. So it's not just a little bot. It will almost feel like a conversation with a human. So I
Oh, wow.
think there's a lot of great tech being evolved in that side. So I would follow people like Ricardo Garcia Maya, in the fintech space. I also interviewed Richie Serna not too long ago. When I interviewed Richie, that was 2 years ago, he was talking about revolutionizing the fintech space
Mhm.
through Phoenix Payments. And now Phoenix is now in their Series B with tons of investments from huge, huge venture capital firms because they're getting rid of the middleman and they're working on a payments process that is using technology as a backbone. So it's really interesting to see both the fintech space and also the voice space evolved and the power of artificial intelligence.
And I think that's tremendous. And to dive to talk a little bit about the voice spaces, you mentioned for customer support, but I believe that you can even help with front end sales. Like if you're doing prospecting and setting appointments, like hiring that out. There's a lot of different opportunities for voice, and I really like that. Sometimes there's too much opportunity, but it's always good to be aware of where we need to dive into. And we'll share the links to Richie's and Ricardo's contact just as well. Or
Thank you. And
actually,
that's what, go ahead.
no, we'll list them out on your podcast, but we'll give them a way to reach them.
Sure. And that's actually the example that Ricardo gave, which is like now if you have somebody that works at a dealership and they're having calls that come in, you can actually start having this back and forth and eliminate a lot of that process as a sales lead. And so you have this AI voice that is working with the customer and going back and forth and then get you to a point where, you eventually will close a deal.
That's incredible. I've always imagined, when we're still young, but I always imagine what's going to be so out of my mind when I'm older that I'm going to be surprised at what technology can do. And this is part of it. So I'm excited to see the future for that.
The other example would be I recently interviewed Nicholas Henrichsen, and he was one of the co-founders of another fintech company, and they're going to be releasing some big announcement in the near future. So I can't share yet, but they're working on a loan company, and normally people were not looking at cars and getting loans and doing all those transactions online. That hasn't been the thing, but
Mhm.
with the pandemic and everything that's happening in this world, their business took off. So now getting loans and going the whole through the whole car buying process online, it's something that's going to be more natural. So it's just really interesting how tech and just having access to different tools in different spaces or in different industries can really change the way you buy, the way you communicate, and the way you do things.
No, I love that. And I want to kind of open it up to, sharing your expertise in regards to our listeners today, because when it comes to perhaps we aren't a developer, perhaps we aren't in the tech space, but we want to either get into it or adopt it into our company, into our startup. What are some of the ways that you've seen, founders, or that you've helped founders or educated to level up to really compete at that level?
So if you don't have the tech space, if you don't have the tech background,
Yeah.
so boot camps can make a difference.
Hmm.
So And Richie's example was perfect. Had graduated from Harvard and was doing consulting and was doing great, but he wanted to move into the tech space. So he moved to Silicon Valley, and he went through a boot camp so he could get the tech chops, kind of convince someone to give him his first job in the engineering department. So he cut his teeth through there,
Oh my
and
God.
within a couple of years, he was ready to launch his own company, to launch his own ventures, because he felt he had enough of that background, and he was ready to launch. And this was a couple of years ago. And like I mentioned, his company is a complete success right now, which I'm going to be interviewing him for a second interview to say, hey, look where you were 2 years ago and look what you're doing now. So I'm really excited because I want to release that during Hispanic Heritage Month. So another best practice that I've seen is, if you don't have the tech chops, if you're not the techie, if you're not going to be the CTO in your company, is find someone that has
Mm.
that skill that you don't have, because business development is needed, marketing is needed. You have a lot of other things that you might be able to contribute as a founder, the strategy, the vision, X, Y, and Z, and you can find someone, and the right partner would be really important, because you get married to this person in a
Mm.
way. You end up spending a lot of time with this person, just like when you bring your first VC. If you're going to go on the VC route, you're going to be spending a lot of time with these people. So make sure that you have someone that you trust, someone that has the capabilities and the background that you need to be able to take your business idea to the next level, if you don't have the technology background that you need.
That's really key. Either learning it through yourself through boot camps specifically, and I like boot camps are like sprints, right? 6 to 8 weeks or 10 weeks, right?
Some are 3 to 5 months. Some are young. Some are less than that. So I mean, you have boot camps. I think the main thing with boot camps is that you make sure that they're verified,
Mm-hmm.
because for a while they were popping up everywhere, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. The other thing that I would suggest is that founders look at accelerator programs, because you might not be ready to launch right away, but look at accelerator programs, incubator programs. Those kinds of programs will help you kind of shape up your idea. And some people do a couple of accelerators before they end up, applying to like a Y Combinator. That's what Ricardo did, and that's what some of the other people that I've interviewed do. So looking at other ways to kind of figure out how to get your idea from just being an idea to actually launching it in a smart way.
It's almost like doing it in a strategic long-term approach. It's not going to be a short-term sprint. It's looking at the building blocks that I need. Even if you're building in a CTO to come in to support you, that relationship building is not, you're not going to find someone perfect in the first month, 3 months. So I love that perspective. Well, Adriana, where can listeners reach out to connect with you, or what's the best place for them to go?
They can go to LatinxAmerica.com, but my main place where I live is LinkedIn. They can find me at Adriana Flores-Ragade on LinkedIn, on Twitter at America Latinx, and on Instagram at Latinx America. So I always get back to people, and I'm always looking for powerful stories. So if you are a founder, or if you know someone that has a very unique story, or that is doing a lot of great things for the Latinx community, you don't have to be Latinx to care about what we're doing. I interview people that are non-Latinx that are champions and allies. And I think that's something else that we need to understand as we build social capital, is that people might not look like us, but they might be rooting for us or becoming our sponsors and our champions along the way. So let's build community and that social capital that we need. Let's take risks, and let's continue to build that generational wealth.
I love that. Oh, Adriana, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me.